Welcome back to the Greek Current Cafe. I'm Thanos Davelis. With 2025 only a few weeks away, we're wrapping up the year with a two-part series looking back at 2024. We'll highlight the people, the trends, and countries that stood out, both in a good way and a bad way. With that in mind, let's kick off with part one, where we're breaking down this year's biggest losers. Joining me today are a Greek Current podcast favorite, Lena Argiri, the DC correspondent for ED, the Greek Public Broadcasting Company, and for Kathimerini. Lena, great to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me, Thanos.
Next up, Justin Horwitz, the founder and president at Really American. And for those of you who don't know Really American, make sure to check them out on Twitter and on social media for some really great content. Justin, great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Thano.
And of course, HALC's Endy Zemenides, wearing what it seems like is Chicago Bears gear. So I hope our Chicago
to honor our 7-game losing streak. The Bears.
And in the spirit of the holidays, I see Andy's got something playing in the background too. I've got an all-time classic Christmas movie playing on my background, the Fellowship of the Ring. As someone has said, it has elves in it, so it counts.
I got the best one, Die Hard.
There you
Die
go.
Hard, best Christmas movie ever.
So this week, as we said, we're kicking off our round with the biggest losers, but we're also kicking around with a new feature, a round robin we're calling Shot Clock, where you'll each have 24 seconds, just like in the NBA, to give us your 3 top losers of the year. With that, Lena, let's kick off with you. Who would you ID as the biggest losers of 2024?
So do I really have just a few seconds to answer?
Yeah. Clock's running down.
Okay, I didn't know that, so I will be super quick. So my top picks for losers this year are the 3 I's, and with that I mean the letter I. And first up, the super champion, Iran. We can all agree deserves the top spot on this year's list of losers. Then incumbents, it's been a rough year for them, both internationally and here in the US, and I would say mainly here in the US after the recent elections. And lastly, international organizations of all kinds, but especially those involved with Gaza, which seem to have lost whatever legitimacy might once had. These are my 2-3.
Justin, let's try to keep it in our 24-second time frame.
Yeah, keeping with the alphabet theme, we'll go Biden, Brandon Johnson, and Bashar al-Assad. I think those are 3 big losers.
All right, Endy.
I like this alphabet game. All right. In honor of Saturday night's main event coming back on NBC and now the new creative genius Triple H, I will go with Hamas, Hezbollah, and the healthcare industry.
It seems like there's one thing that we're seeing in common here, and that's this axis of resistance theme, from Lena's Iran, Endy, you have Hamas and Hezbollah. And, there's others, Bashar al-Assad, who had links with the Iranians. Are Iran and its proxies looking at a much more difficult 2025 after the year they've had? Endy, what's your take here?
They couldn't possibly have had a worse year. They've lost their proxies. Hezbollah, Hamas dismantled. As Justin talked about Bashar al-Assad, he ran. He's hiding in Russia. I think the Houthis are going to be next. But there's a flip side. They could go nuclear. They could be so worried that they could, and we're seeing signs that they're speeding up their nuclear program. One thing that ties back to Lena's incumbent point and Justin's Biden point, Donald Trump's election is bad for Iran too. And there are Iranian hardline Iran hawks, Marco Rubio, Michael Waltz, coming into this administration. So either they're going to realize they're dealing from weakness, or they're going to speed up their nuclear program and try to regain leverage that they have just absolutely lost.
Lena, you have a unique view from Washington, D.C. on how all of this is playing out, and DC's view on Iran. What are you seeing?
So first of all, I would call them something like interconnected losers, because we see Assad says so the balance of power in the Middle East is changing. I would say more correctly, this balance has already changed, and Iran's importance in it has completely been reduced, and it's growing smaller by the day. And the real question here is whether it can adapt or it will fade further into irrelevance. But yes, as I said, my first choice is Iran, which, by the way, I'm pretty sure that Endy is jealous because he would have loved to pick it, but I go first, so it's mine. It's all mine. So when it comes to Iran and why I think it deserves the top spot on the losers list, honestly, I don't even know where to start, because Iran has lost on every possible level this year, and it has lost its influence, and it has lost its ability to have and project power, among many other things, of course. And the interesting thing, guys, is that it all happened in such a short period of time. We're talking just a matter of months, and that's what makes this so remarkable. And the combination of the Israeli strikes that crippled key military capabilities, no matter how hard they're trying to hide it, and exposed Iran's strategic problems, coupled with the setbacks faced by its proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah. We will talk about them later. So all these have been so devastating for its regional ambitions that not even the wildest imagination would have thought so. Let's say a few years back, let's say a few months back, let's say in the summer, nobody would expect something like that to happen. And these events have
not only not expect somebody to happen. Think about their proxies. Bashar al-Assad had been welcomed back into the Arab League. You know, the Iranians were talking about, well, you know, who's going to be the next Ayatollah, almost as if they were going to choose. Iran and Saudi were doing a deal under the auspices of China. What Lena says is like, this was a drastic turn. I mean, maybe yes, the only place for Iran may be freaking safe anymore is the campus of Columbia.
And right now Iran stands weak, and I think it stands exposed for the whole world to see, and its allies and the entire international community are questioning its ability to effectively sustain its role as a power. And that doubt leads to reduced loyalty, it leads to less cooperation, and it leads to a serious decline in its diplomatic and its overall significance. And to put it simply, nobody cares anymore about Iran, about what Iran thinks, about what it wants to achieve. And I think that what is happening today isn't just a short-term crisis for this country. The consequences of this moment will be visible for the years to come.
Justin, you know, Lena brought up these interconnected losers, and it seems like Bashar al-Assad is one of them that's linked to Assad, and he was your that's linked to Iran, and he's your third pick. Break that down for us. You know, is he one of these? Why is he one of these interconnected losers here?
I think just the fact that the Assad regime, as it appears to have fallen, makes him one of the losers. I don't know. I don't know
because he ran away. He ran away. That's it. He didn't even fight. I mean, I don't even. Man, I'd like to dive in more to Justin's Biden loser, because
we'll get to that for sure.
The fact that we've had all of this, everything we're talking about in Iran, the axis of resistance, is not unrelated to our politics. There's a vacuum of power, and frankly, again, I'm stealing from Justin's time here, but you know, instead of where's Hunter, everybody knows where Hunter was. He was with Flavor Flav this week. Where's Joe? There's a situation in the Middle East right now that may lead to an. By the way, Lena was right where it says right now people don't care what Iran thinks. That's why I'm worried about them going nuclear.
Yep, Justin,
I'm worried about them going nuclear, and then that there's like, where's Biden? So, Justin.
Yeah, Justin, give us
why did Biden lose so bad?
Well, I think he fumbled the handoff of the century to Kamala Harris. I think if he backed out earlier, we could have maybe had an open primary and won the election. And I think a lot of the reports that said that he actually endorsed Kamala just to spite the Democrats who forced him out probably is true, the way it all went down. And so I think he bears a lot of the responsibility in losing this most recent election. And I don't think there's any way around that.
Do you think the garbage? Wait, I want to go in. How about his garbage statement? Because that turned into the most viral moment for Trump, the garbage truck. I mean, was that just Biden being Biden, the gaffes, or do you think there was like a little bit of a? I mean, there's a video going around about First Lady Biden, Jill Biden, making fun of Kamala's use of joy. Do you think there was some slight undermining here?
I mean, it looks like it. If Biden was competent enough to do it, then there probably was, you know. I mean, he's same thing with putting the Trump hat on at a union hall. It's like, what was he doing? You know, he's either incompetent and losing it, which I think everybody saw in the debate, or he was angry and trying to undermine our campaign, or maybe a little bit of both. Probably the latter.
Yeah, Lena, since we're on the subject of incumbents, you know, that was in your top three. Why has this year been the year that incumbents are losing out? I mean, Joe Biden obviously is the biggest incumbent that we've been chatting about. Maybe we can kick off with that and look beyond the U.S.
Yes, exactly. Not only here in the US, but this year has been extremely challenging for them in both Europe and the US. And I think there's a pretty clear reason why. We're seeing a combination of political, economic, and social challenges that are really putting the governments to the test, or somewhere in the middle of the perfect storm, I would say. Generally speaking, their popularity falls, and populists of all kinds, both on the left and on the right, have been gaining momentum, and they capitalize on the moment, offering themselves as the answer to what they call the failure of the establishment. We saw that pretty recently here. This is why across both regions, voters are so eager and ready to push for a change. And it's not just one thing, but a mix of problems: economic pain, geopolitical instability, and rising social unrest due, for example, to immigration. This is a huge problem everywhere in the world, that has made them really struggling to hold into public confidence, and in some cases even hold their own power. We've seen this play out in major European countries like Germany and France, where opposition parties and populist leaders have grabbed the opportunity to position themselves as the answer to all the problems and all the challenges.
And incumbents can't, you know, they got to cut something out. They got to cut telling people when there's a problem, when people are feeling pain. They have to stop telling them, no, you're not. Everything's fine. Going, you know, the incumbent, the Biden point, we went an entire year with inflation, people feeling the effects of inflation, and then telling them it's not that bad. We've been telling people immigration is not as bad as, you know, Trump is making it or the MAGA movement is making it. And just last week, New York Times does a story saying it was the largest spike in American history, 8 million people.
Mm-hmm. And also, you know, the discussion and the, you know, the identity politics and, you know, the discussion about political correctness and all these things, I think that they were too much. I mean, of course, there's an issue, and of course, there's an audience out there, huge. But, you know, sometimes these parties look that they're losing touch with reality. That's what I think.
It seems
there
like
are other problems.
It seems like there's this turn to populism again, and that I think many of us thought that was something we had turned the page on, especially with the financial crisis in Greece. I mean, there was a unique angle from Greece on this just in the last decade. Endy, is that a story that we should be, you know, putting front and center again?
Listen, especially with 2-year elections here, and Justin knows better than me because that's what he does for a living. You could have a complete flip in 2 years. So I'm not going to make broad pronouncements. The only broad pronouncement that I think is right is you have to make people feel like you're fighting for them. They can't have a problem. Let's take one of the most liberal cities in America, San Francisco, that recalled their state's attorney or their district attorney because he was just giving them. They were saying we have a problem with crime, and the response was, here's the statistics, crime is okay. When people tell you they're hurting, you have to acknowledge the pain, and you have to make them believe that you're trying to fix it. You can't tell them what they see with their eyes is a mirage. Mm-hmm. And this has been a problem since the 2008 financial crisis. There was this deal in Western capitalist democracy that if you play by the rules and you pay your taxes and you work hard, you're going to get ahead. And now that's not the deal anymore. I'm working hard. My wife is working hard. This is a typical American. We can't afford our health insurance. We can't afford groceries. Gas is going up all the time. Well, acknowledge that and say this is how we're going to work it. Don't point to, unemployment stays down or your wages are going up. Well, great. If my wages are going up 50%, but prices, my healthcare is going up $800 every year.
Of course, it's not just the economic crisis and the persistent inflation and the healthcare. It's a combination of factors, if I may add, Thanos. And there's also, there's the Middle East conflict, which has made them, all these parties and all these governments look indecisive and look ineffective. And then we have the war in Ukraine that is causing fatigue, and it's been dragging on for so many years now. And with its passing day, public support for providing more and more aid is starting to fall, not just in the US, but in Europe as well. And generally speaking, citizens are questioning whether this prolonged support is worth the cost, especially when they're feeling the pain themselves economically. And we have immigration. It's also a major issue. That adds up to populist narratives, and in both Europe and the US, leaders are having a hard time addressing it. That it plays directly into the hands of populists who promised, to take back control over borders and national identity. And I think that perhaps most importantly is the mistrust of institutions, and this is my third loser. We'll talk about this loser later, is growing, and people are increasingly skeptical of the political systems and the elites who run them as a whole. And we just saw that in the elections here. And whether it's economic stagnation or immigration or whatever, or broader global issues or whatever it is, voters are, we see that every day, are increasingly looking for change, and they're blaming incumbents for their inability to solve these problems. So there's a combination of factors here that we have to really take into consideration when we're talking about why they're failing, right?
Mm-hmm. And it's important to say incumbents, right? And not because you're trying to make it just populists have overtaken. Let's remember one of the longest standing Western incumbents, the Tories in England, in the UK, they lost too. So this is not a right-left issue. This is I said. No. I'm telling Thanos. I'm telling Thanos because he made the initial question about populism. So and right now, and this is a challenge for the Trump administration. And I'd love to get Justin's take on it. They're the incumbents now, and they don't have any countervailing force. They can't talk about a Democratic Senate or a Democratic House. They can't talk about a Supreme Court. And frankly, the way they're going to reshape the media, they're not going to even be able to talk about media as a check on them. They own it. This is a pottery barn rule. You broke it, you own it now.
Is that the case, Justin, with the Trump administration as we prepare for January and inauguration?
Is what the case, that they own everything?
They own everything. It's theirs to mess up, basically.
That they're vulnerable to. They're vulnerable. That the anti-incumbent mood within 2 years can be directed at them.
Could be, but a lot of that anti-incumbent mood is, it's like you were just saying, both you and Lena, that there were a list of grievances that voters had that were basically ignored. We pretended like they don't exist, and so this anti-incumbent wave. It could have just been that they felt, look, we are stating these are our issues: immigration, inflation, the cost of everything's going crazy. You guys aren't acknowledging it. You're just pretending everything's all right. And Trump and them came in, and all the anti-incumbents across the world, they were candidates of grievance. We are your retribution. And so if Trump and the administration continues to acknowledge all these problems and then blames it on Biden, which they're going to do, they're so good at branding and messaging and just hammering the point home. I could see them picking up seats in 2 years, depending on what happens.
But they've also promised that this is going to be the best, and they're talking out of both sides of their mouth, by the way, and it's very important to see that they're pointing at Elon and Vivek are pointing at the guy with the cool hairdo in Argentina as a model, right? Because there's a few things that he did that I don't know are going to be tenable here. First of all, devaluing the currency. We're not going to devalue the dollar. We know that. That's a key to the turnaround in Argentina. Two is increasing poverty by 20%. I'm not sure they're going to do that. And so when Elon is saying we're going to have short-term disruption and short-term pain, but it's going to pay off in the long term, that's not how the electoral system works. Short-term disruption, midterms are starting. Midterms are starting in January, people. Whether you like, and by the way, the 2028 presidential election is starting in January.
I think the worst thing politically that Donald Trump could do is listen to everything Elon Musk wants. Elon's just a libertarian who wants what he wants. His agenda is completely out of touch with the American people. But if Trump goes a different way and he goes with his kind of nationalist, populist, Bannon type, agenda, I mean, they could get things done.
But the first thing he says he's going to do is extend the tax cuts. If he extends the tax cuts, that's inflationary. So they have to pick a lane. They can't fight with the Federal Reserve about not cutting interest rates when interest rates are the only way we're going to keep inflation in check. They want to increase the debt ceiling so they can both spend or do more tax cuts. That's inflationary. So I'm not sure they're listening. So I'm going to maintain that they're going to solve the immigration also, because it's kind of been under control. Biden got to it too late. Trump will benefit from that. But a lot of the other stuff, the economic pain, I'm not sure they have the plan. I haven't heard the plan about the economic pain.
Yeah. I think I want to change tracks a little bit and switch over to Lena's number 3, international organizations, which puts us kind of more on a global level here. But Lena, why is this your number 3? I know you alluded to it a little bit. Break it down for us.
Yeah, I mean, more specifically, I would like to talk about those international organizations that are linked to the war in Gaza, if I may, of course, because these organizations, and I will explain.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Although I'm sure that you all know what we're talking about here, are increasingly losing face value for several reasons, and mainly inefficiency and their failure, or even worse, their unwillingness to maintain a balanced approach to the conflict in Gaza. And take the UN, for example, and the stance of their Secretary General on the Gaza war all these months has been unbelievable, anything but balanced, right? And his statements are consistently one-sided. That's the same. So
we're losing you a little bit, Lena.
Hold on. All right, we're back.
All right.
That was bad. That was bad Santa coming in there.
So I was talking about.
I think you were being hacked by Hamas there,
or by UN Secretary General, that I was talking about. How he's not balanced at all. That's what I was saying. I don't know if you were able to listen to what I was saying. That it's hard to see how such an important global organization and the leader of this organization can be so out of touch. And then we have UNRWA. And we have the controversy over its cooperation with Hamas on the ground. And there have been so many allegations, so many facts, so many proofs. And it feels, no matter always, like this organization hasn't done anything or enough to distance itself from these accusations, which further erodes trust in its impartiality. And let's talk about the International Criminal Court and its decision about Israel and about Netanyahu, and Amnesty International and its report in which it strongly criticized and blamed Israel for almost everything, but it failed to properly address the root cause of this conflict. So yes, Thanos, these organizations really deserve a spot on the list of losers. There's no doubt.
And to compound their loss, they get Elise Stefanik to deal with starting in January.
Yeah,
I that's going to be must-watch TV. I mean, when you watch when you watch UN Security Council proceedings, they're kind of boring. They're not as fun as the Adlai Stevenson during the Cuban Missile Crisis going at the Soviet ambassador. Elise Stefanik at the UN Security Council is going to be must-watch TV.
Mm-hmm.
Are all of these issues, whether it's the lack of balance, a failure to address root causes, or these accusations of bias that you've mentioned, Lena, are these making these organizations look more like political players rather than neutral bodies meant to resolve and help solve conflict? And Justin, I want to get your take here too. What's the view from the American public on these developments, or is foreign policy and the UN, for example, not really on the radar?
Mm-hmm. So can I?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's exactly. I mean, when institutions like this lose their credibility, they can't effectively serve their purpose, and they only have one purpose, right? The bottom line here is that the international organizations in general are facing a crisis, and this is something that will likely have long-term consequences for their ability to act as mediators or problem solvers in future conflicts. And I just want to say, I would like to add NATO. I mean, it's another organization that's, of course, not the same, but it might face challenges ahead, and even maybe I would say a crisis of confidence now that Trump is taking office. And that's why I'm including this in the broader list. And we'll remember Trump's threat to pull out of the alliance if other member countries didn't meet their defense spending targets. It's a threat that it's coming back again and again, and this creates uncertainty for other NATO members. And for NATO itself, I mean, it's a lack of consistent US leadership could shake its foundations, and that's something the members will have to deal with really urgently. And it's not just about military strength, it's about trust and commitment among allies. So this is another thing that we should focus on, I mean, the months to come, right?
Yeah. Justin, what's your take here on how Americans view these developments? I know you you've got a good check on the pulse of both on social media and outside in the real world, I guess, on what Americans think about different developments on the political level.
I would say I have never heard more skepticism about NATO in my entire life. I am hearing liberal friends who I would never have thought in a million years would be skeptical of the alliance, saying NATO is pushing us towards World War III. So it's not just the Republicans and the other countries aren't paying enough, and we need them to pick up. But I've actually never in my life heard things from people who aren't far left crazies who've always thought NATO was a warmongering imperialist thing. Who are I actually heard it yesterday that NATO is pushing us towards World War III. And these alliances need to be dismantled. And I was like, well, you need to talk to Endy or something, because people can't think this.
Yeah. But by the way, for all of you out there who are anti-NATO, for every single one of you, this is the greatest, most successful alliance in world history. We have not had a World War III. For how long, people? All right. We are 70 plus years of NATO and had not had a World War III. Just think of the distance. And we talked about World War I and World War II, but there was 100 straight years of European wars. And the world was very much Europe back then in the 1800s and 1900s. NATO has prevented World War III. And frankly, if you don't have an alliance, and if you look at some of the conflicts, especially in the Middle East, I know people are not into reading anymore, but go back and read. Go back and read The Guns of August. That's for Europe, people who want to know how Europe could fall apart. Go back and read Fromkin's A Peace to End All Peace. There's a lot of references to World War II in our political system now, but the situation on the ground looks a lot more like World War I, and the bad resolution, the post-World War I situation led to World War II. So if you don't want an alliance, fine. If you don't want an international system, fine. That just means you want to live in a more dangerous world. We should have learned a few things from COVID, from September 11th, and the interconnected migration, climate, and economic crises. There's no such thing as over there, guys. There's no such thing as over there. For 20 years, our oceans and our borders have not protected us fully.
I think that's the perfect note to end this chat on. Endy, Lena, Justin, great chatting with you. Thanks for joining us, and Merry Christmas.
Merry
Happy holidays.
Christmas.
Merry
Okay.
Christmas, guys.